Today, there's no other word for it but Ribfest. I'm going to be doing 4 types of ribs. We're going to be rubbing them up, getting them out on the Lone Star Grillz offset, giving them a good smoke, glazing some of them, and at the end, we're going to have nothing short of a feast. Yes, I'm doing ribs today. I'm doing some St. Louis cut spare ribs. I'm doing some country style pork ribs. I'm doing beef back ribs, and I'm doing beef short ribs. Now for 3 of those, we're going to be putting some sauce or some glaze, whatever you want to call it, on them. The pork ribs are going to get one type of sauce, and the beef back ribs are going to get a glaze. And that's what I want to do right now, is get that glaze ready. So this is going to be a chili garlic honey glaze, and we're starting with a 1/4 cup of honey. And to this, I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of chili garlic sauce. If you've never had chili garlic sauce, it's pretty common in Asian markets, Vietnamese markets. It's super tasty, and when paired with something sweet like honey, it's terrific for a glaze. Just want to mix this together here. You can already smell that chili garlic sauce coming up with this honey. Oh man, that's good. Do a quick little taste here. This is sort of the definition of that sweet heat flavor that you want. All right, I'm gonna cover this up. This is gonna go in the refrigerator, and we're gonna move on to making our second sauce. So our second sauce, as I mentioned, is gonna be for the pork ribs, the St. Louis cut spare ribs and the country style pork ribs. And one of the things I like to do is just take a regular barbecue sauce. What I'm using today is just a Hunt's hickory flavored barbecue sauce, and we're gonna doctor this up. And this is 18 ounces of barbecue sauce. To this, I'm adding a 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar and 2 tablespoons of a coarsely ground black pepper. We're gonna mix this all together here. That apple cider vinegar is gonna give you some extra tanginess, a little bit of bite to this, and that pepper, oh, it's great in barbecue sauce. Sometimes I'll use a lot of pepper in a rub, like my brown sugar pepper rub, which is really good on ribs. Let's get a little taste of this here. Just that addition of apple cider vinegar gives you such a nice little bite. You sort of feel that at the back of your throat as you're tasting this. Really nice. All right, this is gonna go in the refrigerator. It's gonna hang out until we need it later today. Right now, let's get our ribs out here. So the first ribs we are gonna season up today are our beef back ribs. Now, I always say that beef back ribs don't win any beauty contests, especially when they're done, because there'll be a lot of pullback from the bone. You'll see exposed bone here, but there's a lot of great flavor in this meat if you get a good rub on it. And I know a lot of people don't like to put sauce on beef ribs, but with these, I've always found doing a glaze near the end does wonders to add a lot more flavor, and it gives it a good look. You know, you don't just always have those bones exposed showing. So it's kind of a personal preference. If you don't want to add any glaze or sauce to it, you certainly don't have to. But we're going to start with a great rub, and the rub I'm using today is Smoke Shake from North Texas Barbecue Addicts. I picked this up a month or so ago. I've used it several times. I love it on beef. It's got a great Texas sort of flavor profile to it. So we're going to give these back ribs a good rub here. We're also using this same rub on our beef short ribs today. All the beef is getting the same rub, and all the pork is getting the same rub. Now there is a membrane on these beef ribs, but unlike the pork ribs, the St. Louis ribs, I don't like to remove the membrane here. One reason is these are really fragile. If you can see, there are holes between these ribs because there's not a lot of stuff holding it together there. Like I said, no beauty contest winners here for the beef back ribs, but that membrane helps hold everything together. But it's worth that extra effort when you're eating it to leave that membrane on, because you keep everything together as you're cooking it. And I always find myself when I'm eating beef back ribs is I'll just be picking the meat off, cutting it off. This meat is great for chili. If you want to make some great chili, smoke up some beef ribs, take the meat, use that. Just get a little bit on the ends here. One more little pass with our rub. And let's move on to our short ribs. So here are our beef short ribs. These are beef chuck short ribs, and we're gonna hit them with the same Smoke Shake rub. Give them a good coating. Every side. Do it assembly line style today. Don't have to worry too much about the bone side here, but we'll give it a little bit of a shake. Get our ends. All right, our beef short ribs are rubbed up. I'm gonna get these off here. We're gonna get our pork ribs over here. And I'm not worried if our pork ribs get any of this smoke shake rub on them. It's terrific, but I am gonna be adding a different rub on those. So I've got 3 racks of these St. Louis ribs. I've already removed the membrane. I didn't want to do that on video. It's kind of just, you show it the same thing each time. I'll put a link to a video I did on removing the membrane. Really simple. And just one thing to remember when you do that, it isn't always a perfect process. One of these was not easy. I had to pick and pull and it just didn't want to cooperate. So sometimes they pull off all in one strip, no problem. Other times, it takes a little more effort. But we're gonna go ahead and get this rubbed up, and you can see I already have some of the smoke shake that got on there from the tray, no problem. But the rub I'm using for this is an Adkins rub. Now, I had never heard of this until a few years ago, but I was looking on Amazon for some different rubs and I saw this and saw it had good ratings, people liked it. And then once I used it in a video the first time, I got a lot of messages from people saying, oh yeah, they sell that here, they sell that here. I guess it's really common in Texas and other areas of the country, in grocery stores. I've never seen it in any stores out here. So I just buy it on Amazon whenever I want it and put it in a shaker and go to town. It's got great flavor. We're just gonna give a good coating to our ribs. I didn't do any real additional trimming on these ribs. These were trimmed at the butcher. So they're just squared off. There's a few little flaps there, but I'm just gonna leave that meat. I'm not worried about that. Get our edges here. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get the other 2 racks of St. Louis rubbed up, and then we're gonna move on to our country style pork ribs. Okay, so here are our country style pork ribs. These are boneless country style pork ribs. Now, country style pork ribs are generally just a pork butt that's been cut up into big old hunks of pork, as you can see here. You get some of the sections that are just held together by the fat. I'm not gonna remove anything here. This doesn't look too bad in terms of trimming. So let's go ahead and season these up. Same seasoning, that Adkins rub. I can't remember if it's A-T-K-I-N-S, not like the diet. I think maybe A-D-K-A-N-S. I'll put a link in the video description to it. All right, country style ribs rubbed up, St. Louis spare ribs rubbed up, beef back ribs rubbed up, and beef short ribs rubbed up. Let's go get that smoker going and get these on. All right, the Lone Star Grillz is up to temp. I'm running it between 225 and 250 today. I think we're right around 250 right now. And this is the 20 by 42 offset smoker that Lone Star Grillz sent to me. I've been using the heck out of it and I love this thing. It is super efficient. Let's go fill it with some ribs and see how they do. We're gonna put our beef back ribs on this top rack and the beef short ribs. Everything's going bone side down today. I have to temporarily remove my ambient temperature probe so I can slide the rack out. Pork ribs are going to occupy the bottom shelf today. And now our country style ribs. I'm putting the country style ribs closest to the firebox. They're thicker, they're gonna take that a little bit higher temperature better. It's pretty even across. I find about a 10 to 15 degree difference from the right side to the left side, but keeping these over here perfect. And this last little guy I ended up cutting in half. He had that little piece of fat that was holding them together, so we just took that off. All right, everybody's on. Got a good fire going. Let's close this up and get smoking. So Ribfest is underway. I'll see you back here in a couple hours when we check our ribs. All right, we've been going 2 hours. Our pit temp is holding in the 220s. Let's check our ribs. Those are looking really good. Now, just from experience, I know that the pork ribs are not ready to be wrapped yet. The St. Louis, not at 2 hours. Baby backs, maybe. These country style pork ribs are very thick, so they need a little more time before being wrapped. But the beef ribs are on the upper rack, and that upper rack runs about 20 to 30 degrees higher than the lower rack. So I'm gonna go ahead and check these. As you can see, we've really got pullback on the bones from the back ribs. As I mentioned, beef back ribs don't win any beauty contests, but these are looking darn good. So I want to check the short ribs first. I'm just looking for resistance here. And there's still resistance in there. They're not to the stage where I want to wrap them yet. Back ribs, they're feeling pretty tender. You know, actually the short ribs are pretty tender. So I think I am going to transfer the beef back ribs and the short ribs into foil pans right now with a glaze on the back ribs and a little bit of moisture in those pans to help them finish up. And let me just do a quick check on these pork ribs. I'm just going to check the country style ribs first. Yeah, they still need more time. They're tender, but they're not to that place where I want to glaze them yet. Let me just do a quick check here of the St. Louis. Same thing, the bottom rack, the pork ribs need a little bit more time. I am going to spritz them, and I'm just going to spritz them with some plain water right now. Just going to go from the side here, so I don't have to pull my rack out. And we're going to go ahead and transfer these beef ribs into some foil pans. All right, our beef ribs are back on in the foil pan. In about an hour, I think we're gonna take those out of there, put them back on the rack to sort of finish up for about half an hour. And at the same time that we take the beef ribs out of the foil pans, we're gonna be putting the pork ribs in the foil pans. We'll sauce those, put a little bit of water for some extra moisture. They'll also spend about an hour wrapped in that foil, and then we'll take them out, let them finish on the rack open for about another half hour. So our beef ribs are probably gonna be about an hour ahead of our pork ribs. But that's all right, we're just gonna wrap those up in foil when they're done, put them in a pan, let them hold until the pork ribs are ready. So we're gonna close this up, let these keep going. We'll see you back here in about an hour. All right, we are about 4 hours into this. Now, I'm not quite sure what happened, but I've lost track somewhere of when I put the beef ribs on in the foil and when I was supposed to put the pork ribs in their wrap. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna do now. This happens on occasion. Not every cook goes perfect, but let's see how these pork ribs are doing. All right, I'm gonna pop my ambient temperature probe out of here. So I wanna do a couple little probe checks here because it may end up that I'm not gonna wrap these since I think I let them go an extra hour. I think it's been 4 hours that these have been on here, but they've got great color. We've got pullback from the bone here on the pork ribs. The country style ribs are really tender. I've used the term calling an audible before, just like in football, and that's what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna go ahead and sauce these right now on the rack. I'm not gonna take them off, not gonna wrap them. We're gonna let them finish just like this, but I'm also gonna take the beef ribs out of the foil pans and put them back on, give them a little more glaze so that they can finish on the rack, tighten up a bit. We're gonna go ahead and get our doctored barbecue sauce on our ribs here, our pork ribs. And then these will probably spend an hour more on here. So instead of 30 minutes for the beef ribs sitting on the rack, they're gonna be going an hour just with the pork ribs. Now for the country style ribs, I wanna be able to get a good coverage over all of them. So I'm actually gonna sauce those in a little pan right here. So I'm gonna slide this back in for a minute. And the temperature's been holding really stable in that 225 to 250 range. This Lone Star Grillz offset is really efficient with wood. I've used 5 quarter splits, and they're short. They're only about 10 inches long. All right, let's get our beef ribs out of those pans and back on the cooking grate. All right, we're gonna start with our short ribs. Yeah, I'd say those are pretty tender already. We have one that fell off the bone. We'll just reassemble him. And if he won't stay on the bone, we'll just put him on without it. Just want to put a little bit more of this chili garlic honey glaze on here. Okay, you know how I said you make mistakes? This didn't have that chili honey garlic glaze on it before, but guess what? It does now. It's gonna be good. All right, so this one's just not gonna be on the bone. The bone's off. I'm gonna put these back on here. All right, let's get our back ribs off here. Now these I know I put the glaze on, so it's gonna get some more. See, I do mess up. Not everything goes perfect. So you remember what I said about no beauty contest, but man, these smell good. I'm just gonna give these a light glaze. Can even get some of the liquid off the bottom and use that too. All right, and these are so delicate, I'm gonna use gloves with insulators on to get these back on this rack. Glaze this one. And I've had cooks before where something comes up in the middle and you end up delayed, you gotta stop, it takes longer, it takes less time. Sometimes you just gotta roll with it. Sometimes you make a mistake, sometimes circumstances happen and you gotta deal with it. As long as it tastes good at the end, that's what counts. All right, we're gonna close this up. Let these go for 45 minutes to an hour, and I'll bring you back when it's time to pull these off. All right, we are at just about 5 hours, so these ribs have been going for almost an hour back on the grill grates with nothing covering them just to finish up and tighten up. So let's see how we're doing. And you may notice that the ambient temperature probe is back on. I actually forgot to put it back on when I closed this up before. So I just opened it up, put it back on real quick. But I'm gonna go ahead and pop that off right now because I wanna slide this rack out. Oh yeah. Fantastic color on these. I just wanna do a final tenderness check with the probe. Oh yeah. Let's check our country style ribs. Oh yeah. Now I know the beef ribs are done, so I'm just gonna take all these off. We're gonna get them inside, get them wrapped up so they rest for about half an hour, and then we're gonna have a taste. All right, here is our rack of St. Louis ribs. Now I'm gonna be taking each type of rib out here, cutting into it, and I'll be plating that piece. And I'm gonna be plating it with some coleslaw. Now this is coleslaw from a recipe that I did a video on quite a while back. I'll put a link up in the corner here and in the video description to that coleslaw. Super easy, and it goes great with barbecue because it has a little bit of barbecue sauce in it. But right here, we're just gonna cut in and get some of these St. Louis ribs. And let's see, I'm gonna try and find the bone here on these. I never do a great job with that, but let's see. I think we're gonna go right here and see if we get lucky. Pretty close. Let's see. There we go. Yes, that looks good. I'm gonna cut a couple more ribs. And these will be our St. Louis that we plate up. So here is one of our country style pork ribs. And again, we're just gonna cut into it. Go right here. It's got a little bit 2 sections. Oh, looking good. Yes. I like to do slices of these too. These are really good. Some nice fat content in these because it's basically pork butt. You can see that. Oh, that's enough slices for me. Now we're gonna move on to our next rib. Now for our beef short ribs, and I just took the one that had already come off the bone. Makes it a little easier here. I'm just gonna slice right down the middle. Oh yeah. Whenever I do these are the performers when it comes to smoke rings. They always get a nice smoke ring in there, lots of juice. I just love these little things. I'm gonna do the same thing with this. I'm gonna cut some slices. These are great to make sliders. You just slice them like this, put them on the little slider buns, top them with some caramelized onions or anything you want. All right, on to the back ribs. And finally, we have our beef back ribs. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these don't win any beauty contests, and you can see why. There's nothing wrong with them. There's great beef flavor in here, but they always get this really dark color on them, that bark. They're not burned, it's just bark. And they pull away from the bone, so you have the bare spots of the bone. And it helps if you give them a little more glaze like I did here. That chili garlic honey glaze just gives it a little bit of an extra nice look. But it's gonna taste great. Let's cut one of these. You can see, look at that nice smoke ring in there. And it's really juicy. It's just that the layers of meat on here are pretty thin. So like I said, I usually end up just cutting the meat off of these and using it in other things, but these are really good. So I'm gonna go ahead and plate some of these up, get some coleslaw alongside all this, and we're gonna have a taste. All right, here is our plate with our St. Louis pork ribs, our country style pork ribs, our beef short ribs, and our beef back ribs, and our coleslaw. And you know what, I'm just gonna taste the coleslaw first. I've had it before, it's great, but I wanna taste some. Here we go. To me, coleslaw like this is the perfect side dish with any sort of barbecue. If you put this and some great potato salad with any of these barbecue items, it's killer. All right, first I wanna try some of the pork country style ribs. So I'm just gonna grab a piece, take a bite. Let's see. All of that great fattiness, because it's basically pork butt. That Adkins rub on here works really well, and that barbecue sauce that we doctored up with the extra tang of the apple cider vinegar and the pepper. Peppery, peppery, peppery flavor. I love that on pork. Now it's time for a St. Louis rib. Here we go. That's the way I like it, with a bite, not fall off the bone. If you want these fall off the bone, I'd go probably another 45 minutes, and I would definitely do a wrap portion of this. That really helps tenderize them even more. So if that's the way you like them, more time and add a wrap just before you let them finish up on the grill to tighten up. But for me, this is perfect. Someone asked me the other day, which is my favorite of the pork ribs when you're talking about spare ribs, baby backs, or St. Louis cut, and it is the St. Louis cut. Now back rib time. Now I already cut a piece off because remember I told you I usually cut pieces off of there, and here it is. Now this one has that chili garlic honey glaze on it, so I know it's got a little bit of a kick, but I don't mind. And as I think I mentioned before, a lot of people do not like sauce on beef ribs, and that's okay. I like sauce on beef ribs, and I had intended to not have any on the short ribs, but I forgot. They're gonna be great anyway, but man, this back rib, terrific. And let me show you here. You can just pull this meat away. Look at that. It just comes off there, so tender. So that membrane really doesn't get in the way if you just wanna pull the pieces off and eat them. Finally, our beef short rib. Now this also has that chili garlic honey glaze on it, even though I didn't originally intend that, so let's see. That smoke shake rub from North Texas Barbecue Addicts is perfect on beef. This is probably the 4th or 5th time I've used that on a beef dish. It's fantastic. You pair that with the chili garlic honey glaze. That adds a little extra flavor here and a little bit of a kick. This would have been fine without that glaze, but happy accident. Sometimes you make a mistake and it turns out good. So I really wanted to put the Lone Star Grillz offset to the test today by loading it up with ribs, and it came through with flying colors. It cooked pork ribs, 2 different kinds, beef ribs, 2 different kinds. And I'm just learning with every time I use that smoker, I can throw anything at it and it's gonna come out terrific.